The letters were the worst of it. Not the empty coal scuttle, not the dust sheets over the good furniture, not even the way the cook had started stretching one chicken across 3 days. It was the letters, stacked and restacked on her father's old desk, each one a polite demand dressed up as a courtesy, each one proof that a good man's death did not cancel a good man's debts. Eleanor Hartley had read them all twice. She was reading them a third time when the carriage wheels sounded on the gravel outside, too fine and too loud for their quiet street. Nell. Her mother appeared in the doorway, a hand at her throat. Nell, there is a crest on that carriage. Eleanor rose, smoothing a gown that had been turned twice already, and went to the window. A black lacquered carriage, for matched bays, a coat of arms she did not recognize but understood at once to belong to someone who did not visit houses like theirs by accident. Whoever it is, Eleanor said, with more calm than she felt, he has come to the wrong address. He had not. The man who was shown into their small parlor a few minutes later filled it in a way that had nothing to do with his height, though he had that too. He wore black, unadorned, correct in every particular, and he looked at the room, the faded curtains, the chair with the mended arm, Eleanor's mother twisting her hands, with an expression that gave away nothing at all. Miss Hartley. His voice was low, even, the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed without needing to raise it. I am Ashcombe. I believe you once knew me as Julian Vane. Something in her chest turned over, quick and unbidden. For years dissolved in a moment. An assembly room in Denbrook, a garden that smelled of cut grass, a young man who had not yet been a duke, laughing at something she'd said about the vicar's terrible poetry. She had thought of that evening more often than she would ever have admitted, and told herself each time that he had certainly forgotten it entirely. He did not act now as though he remembered it either. His eyes, when they met hers, were courteous and shuttered, a door closed and locked from the inside. Your Grace. She curtsied, because there was nothing else to do with her hands. You do us an honor. Won't you sit? I will not stay long. He did not sit. I think you know your father's circumstances, Miss Hartley. I think you know them better than most, given that you have been keeping these accounts yourself since his death. It was not a guess. She felt the color come into her face. I don't see how that is your Grace's concern. It is entirely my concern. For the first time something flickered behind the flat courtesy, gone before she could name it. 11 years ago, your father did my family a service that saved this dukedom from a scandal that would have ended it. My father meant to repay that debt properly. He died before he found the courage to do it in a manner that wouldn't wound your father's pride. I do not intend to make my father's mistake. Eleanor's mother had gone very still by the cold hearth. I am prepared, the Duke went on, each word placed like a stone in a wall, to settle your father's debts in full. Your mother and sister will want for nothing. You will have a household of your own, a title, and protection for the whole of your life. And in return, Eleanor made herself ask it plainly, because she would not stand in her own parlor and be handled like a parcel. In return, you will marry me. The silence afterward had a texture to it, thick enough to touch. Her mother made a small sound. Eleanor did not take her eyes from his face, searching it for some sign of what he wanted her to feel. Pity, gratitude, anything human, and found only that same locked door. You ask this, she said slowly, as though it were a business arrangement. That is precisely what it is. No apology in it. I will not pretend otherwise, Miss Hartley, and I would think less of you if you asked me to. I do not offer affection I do not feel, and I will not require you to perform it either. I ask only for your name at Ashcombe and your discretion. Nothing more. It should have been easier to refuse a man for his coldness than for his cruelty. Eleanor found it was not. Refusal meant her mother in a smaller house still, her sister Sophie coming out into society in gowns twice remade, meant more letters, meant watching everything her father had built go to men who had never known him. She thought, again, of a garden in Denbrook, and made herself stop thinking of it. I will need a day, she said, to speak with my mother. You may have 3. He inclined his head, already turning for the door, already a man who considered the matter settled. At the threshold he paused, and for one moment, so brief she would spend weeks afterward wondering if she'd invented it. His gaze went to the mended chair, the thin curtains, the whole threadbare dignity of the room, and something that was not quite coldness moved through his face. Then it was gone, and he was bowing, and the door was closing, and Eleanor Hartley stood in the wreck of her old life, deciding whether to walk into a new one with a man who had just told her, in so many words, not to expect to be loved in it. She said yes 3 days later. Not for hope, for her mother, for Sophie, for the memory of her father's good name. She told herself that was reason enough, and that the rest of it, the garden, the laugh, the strange flicker at the door, belonged to a version of him that no longer existed, if it ever had. The wedding, a fortnight later, was small, correct, and utterly without warmth. The Duke of Ashcombe said his vows as though reading a legal document. Eleanor said hers, and did not let herself look for anything in his face while she did. ## Chapter 2. Ashcombe Hall. The journey north took 2 days, and Julian spoke perhaps 40 words in the whole of it. Eleanor spent the silence watching the country change through the carriage glass, hedgerows giving way to stone walls giving way, on the second afternoon, to a long avenue of black elms that opened at last onto Ashcombe Hall itself. She had imagined it grand. She had not imagined it like this. A house so vast it seemed to swallow the weak autumn light, its windows catching the last of the sun like 100 watching eyes. "It's beautiful," she said, because it was, and because the silence had become unbearable. "It is old," Julian said, which was not the same thing, and offered nothing further. It was the third woman on the steps who broke the chill, stepping forward with both hands extended before anyone could stop her. "And I am no one of consequence at all, merely Julian's aunt, and I have been looking forward to this for a fortnight." Lady Ophelia's eyes were warm, assessing Eleanor with open curiosity rather than judgment. "Ophelia Grant, you must be exhausted, coming out of this wind before my sister-in-law lectures us all on manners." "I was not aware manners required an introduction before insult, Ophelia," the dowager said, already turning back toward the house. "But perhaps things have changed." It set the tone for everything that followed. Eleanor's rooms, when she was shown to them, were in the west wing, smaller than she'd expected for a duchess, though pleasant, with tall windows that caught the morning sun. She did not know, and would not learn for some time, that Julian had specified those particular rooms himself, over his mother's suggestion of a chillier suite facing north. Did not know that 4 years ago, in a garden in Dinbrook, she had once said she couldn't abide waking in a dark room, and that he had remembered. She only knew that her husband bid her good night in the corridor with the same flat courtesy he'd used in her father's parlor, and that when his door closed at the end of the hall, the sound of it seemed very final. She lay awake a long time in the vast cold bed, listening to a house full of strangers, and told herself that loneliness was a fair price for security, and did not entirely believe it.